about average age.
How many children did he have?
They had no children.
No children?
No. We have everybody in here now, we got a couple still in there. Okay, get everybody to come on in here and join us. Okay, a couple of questions here. Yes, Mr. Randolph was about 54 when he died. The Randolphs did not have any children, but they did raise Mrs. Randolph's niece, and her name was, interestingly enough, the same as Mrs. Randolph's, Elizabeth Harrison. The bedchamber to the back here would reflect Elizabeth staying with the Randolphs. She was actually lived with Mr. and Mrs. Randolph until she married. Now the room you looked at as you came in, that's probably more for young gentlemen. If you notice, sir, the sword and boots back there. Very likely Mrs. Randolph's brothers or his nephews could have been coming here, going to the College of William and Mary and staying with the Randolphs. Anybody notice the pallets out in the passageway? Rolled up, looks sort of like a rolled up sleeping bag. What do you think might have slept on those? Slaves. Slaves, absolutely, madam. If you're going to come here, you have your personal slave, manservant, or maidservant. Very likely they are sleeping next to your bed or maybe in those passageways because they will be on call to you 24 hours a day. Now, you do see the wealth in this home. To our eye today, maybe it doesn't look quite as ostentatious as we would expect from one of the most powerful men and one of the most wealthy here in the colony. But if you have been to Mount Vernon and been above stairs, anybody remember what it looked like up there? Hmm? What was it painted, sir?
Stairs?
It's interesting, though, most of us do not remember what it looks like above stairs. But why would you? Mr. Washington whitewashed those walls.
Look at who's coming over here.
Good morning, citizens.
Good morning.
Am I audible by all of you? Can I be heard? Very well. I apologize that I do not have the oratorical ability as Mr. Patrick Henry, whom I dare say, as he perhaps is to stand shortly this day to speak in the convention being held in our capital, could be heard at this distance, every word and syllable. However, I will make effort to express my opinion and my concerns to all of you here this morning, and as well a promise to attend to any questions, any opinions that you should desire to put forth as well. God save the King.
Save the King.
I can tell, indeed, that there's not the usual response in paying our courtesies to His Majesty and His Majesty's government. My name is Jefferson, Thomas Jefferson. I represent Albemarle County, 120 miles directly westwards as the crow should fly, but perhaps many of you have already discovered in making your way east from that vicinage a good 5 days in the saddle. But as I can take note, many of you appear to have arrived here most refreshed, having indeed arrived safely as well. And I presume a good many have come down from the northwest along the Ohio River, let alone perhaps to the extent of the Illinois, for your safety. I wish to make comment upon that accordingly. However, citizens, I think indeed the neglect of your courtesies to a great extent to give praise to His Majesty and His Majesty's government is indeed evidence that you are wont to support the convention here in Virginia, now being held in this city this day, this summer, 1774, say the very first representation of the freeholders throughout our united colonies in this effort in Congress in Philadelphia. Most curious why I am not in attendance, I wish to answer that upon my way to this city to attend that convention, I'm afraid that I fell ill. It appears that in my experience, whenever politics is wont to rise to a most acute attention. I am wont to develop a nervous stomach, indigestion, and as well dysentery. And therefore I have been held up several weeks with such an illness. I'm curious whether there are any here seated in politics. Citizens, you are the happier and the healthier for it. And yet I hope we recognize, and we most surely should recognize as inherent in nature and the nature of man, that politics is necessary for the orchestration of governments. And government, we know, is necessary, self-evident, to be seated for the protection of those natural rights. Governments and our laws secured in order to protect us from injury by one another, in order to secure our natural rights that we might freely indulge them, but foremost, to allow us to be free to pursue our own industry and our own improvement, and not, indeed, to allow for the neglect or the taking of our natural rights from us without just cause. Have we not seen these last several years in particular to be an example in which government has not served indeed the people that allow it to be seated, but rather that government has endeavored to serve itself, and His Majesty's government perhaps to profit most from this self-indulgence. Let us recognize that though there was surely a crime committed in Boston Harbor last December, the destruction of private property, to wit, 342 cases of tea, that there was a greater crime committed there, and that indeed, by the support of the government of the East India Company, to put forth in a sale upon the people, an enforced sale of the commodity of that company, tea, the commodity, and a surcharge upon the commodity, a tax, if you will, levied not by the people themselves, but placed there by the government and the company in order to support that company which might otherwise go bubble. This surely a neglect of the natural rights of mankind. When apprised of this crime in our papers here in Virginia, and happy indeed to have several papers available to take account of the current events, we became most concerned that what has happened in Massachusetts Bay could indeed be our experience here. And that surely the most supported this past June, when we heard the effect of His Majesty's Boston Port Bill, the closing of the Port of Boston, the prohibiting of a free trade and commerce there, martial law declared in that city, the sequestering of His Majesty's troops in private homes. It was with that reference in our newspapers that we realized indeed, if we do not react, if we do not take a side with our sister colony, Massachusetts Bay, that this great imposition upon our natural rights should surely find itself into Virginia, let alone that His Majesty's government should be recognized to have the power as well to close down the Hudson River, denied trade to the Port of New York, closed down the Delaware, denied trade to the Port of Philadelphia, and certainly to stretch a flotilla from Cape Charles to Cape Henry, to close off the Chesapeake and neglect trade to the many plantations along the many rivers that drain into that great bay. Once and for all, Virginia stood fast, proclaimed a day of fasting, humiliation, and prayer, the 1st of June, to recognize that the problems in Massachusetts Bay are now shared by the people here in Virginia. To wit, citizens unable to attend the convention and thereby be elected a delegate to go up to Philadelphia this September, I sent forth from my sickbed by my manservant Jupiter instructions for the convention, instructions that they might follow in order to recognize amongst all the burgesses our great argument with His Majesty's government. Those instructions were delivered here by Jupiter shortly. They were given 2 copies, one to my cousin, Mr. Peyton Randolph, Speaker of our House of Burgesses, the other copy given to Mr. Patrick Henry. Mr. Randolph then had his copy printed by Mrs. Clementina Rind in this city under the new title, A Summary View of the Rights of British America, set forth in some resolutions intended for the inspection of the present delegates of the people of Virginia, now in convention. My name is not affixed as author of this pamphlet. Rather, it states by a native and member of the House of Burgesses that my anonymity be secure, that I not interfere with the business of my fellow Burgesses in their attempts to draw together a common concern that Mr. Jefferson has been considered by many to be somewhat radical. And I am happy to say that indeed this pamphlet, now widely distributed, has been generally agreed upon, and that Mr. Randolph has indeed made known to me that he will take his pamphlet to Philadelphia with him and to have it printed there in that city, that the delegates of this first Congress might well be apprised that the concerns of Virginia are the concerns of all the colonies. What Mr. Henry ever did with his copy, I should never know. Of course, I've never known Patrick to read anything through to begin with. Possibly has not even looked at it. But citizens, I wish to reiterate for you now several points of this summary view, that you might be apprised of its general recognition. Firstly, to cite that indeed our ancestors, before their emigration to America, were the free inhabitants of the British dominions in Europe and possessed the right which nature has given to all men of departing the country in which chance, not choice, had placed them, and of going in search of new habitations, and of their establishing new societies under such laws and regulations as to them should seem most likely to promote the public happiness. In its essence, citizens, to remind His Majesty and His Majesty's government that our ancestors, as well as those who continue to come here, not only to Virginia, but all of our colonies, come here as free adventurers, free laborers, free corporations, with the right to pursue their welfare, to pursue their prosperity, and as well to secure their natural rights for their happiness and their freedom. And especially this was established in Virginia by our charter more than 150 years ago, and that we have surely witnessed of late an encroachment, an insidious encroachment upon that charter and a neglect of our natural rights. Now, citizens, I know my next comment will offend many of my fellow planters here today, and I hope indeed that it makes a mark upon their heart and their conscience for the most trifling reasons, and sometimes for no conceivable reason at all. His Majesty has rejected laws of the most salutary tendency. The abolition of domestic slavery is the general object of desire in those colonies where it was unhappily introduced in their infant state. But previous to the enfranchisement of the slaves we have, it is necessary to exclude all further importations from Africa. Yet our repeated attempts to effect this by prohibitions and by imposing duties which might amount to a prohibition have been hitherto defeated by His Majesty's negative. All of us, in our heart and our conscience, know that slavery is an abomination. That is, God is a just God. He cannot but abhor it. And to recognize surely His justice will not sleep forever. Nothing is more assuredly written in the book of faith than that these people ought to be free. And yet I recognize, as I hope many of you do, that such an abomination carried on now for so many decades and through so many generations cannot be amended in a night, in several days, months, indeed, perhaps even in an immediate lifetime. But we must begin a path towards abolition. My opinion is we must first cease any further importation of slaves here, to recognize surely that Virginia is already shackled with a population of these people near 50% of the general population. To wit, we must also begin to cease any further expanse of this barbarism westwards, to the borders, not only in the Appalachians, but as well beyond to the Mississippi River. And we must begin to relax our laws of manumission, to provide indeed for the freedom of more than 1 or 2 slaves per annum, and I would hope indeed to put forth a system of education, to instruct them in skills useful for their livelihood and their welfare, and as important, to amend a system of education amongst us, to instruct us how we might receive these people as free people in our future. I can assure you that we must begin, and therefore I provoke a public debate with my comment within this summer review, and hope that our newspapers may take example as well. Lastly, citizens, to cite that indeed these are our grievances which we lay before His Majesty with that freedom of language and sentiment which becomes a free people, claiming their rights as derived from the laws of nature and not as the gift of their Chief Majesty. Let those who continue to flatter fear, for flattery is not an American art. To give praise which is not due might be well from the venal, but would ill beseem those who are asserting the rights of human nature. Those who desire to peruse more intently and more further my summary review are welcome to pick up a copy at the post office here in this city, where I understand that many copies are available for purchase. I hope that you might make indeed an acquisition of this copy, peruse more intently what we consider to be our greatest defense, which we most surely recognize is our greatest argument with His Majesty's government. Now then, citizens, as it appears the heavens are want to open up on this free assembly, I shall very quickly put forth several opinions and then welcome more directly your opinions or questions. I am concerned for those who come down from the Northwest for their safety, and I can assure you that as His Lordship, John Murray, the Earl of Dunmore, our Royal Governor, has raised militia himself to venture up and maintain peace with the Shawnee in particular, that I do support His Lordship's mission to protect our settlements on the frontier, and if needs be, even to wage battle with these hostile Indian people. It appears the Shawnee, the Mingoes, the Muncies, the Wyandots are incapable of any reconciliation, that they can never be regarded as our friends. And therefore, I do suggest an armed force to be placed against them if they are to neglect and deny any efforts to maintain peace with them. We look for the safe return of His Lordship and his militia, surely, but also the safety of those who have taken up land on the frontier. Now, the Cherokees, the Tuscaroras, the Catawbas are of different experience directly west here in Virginia. I, having been born and raised amongst them, can account for it. And you will see, to wit, if there are any Cherokees here today, what I speak of. Are there any Cherokees amongst us? You hardly ought to make recognition of them. Any Cherokees, you are free to make your identity known. One, as you can see, citizens, the Cherokees had become long accustomed to European manufacturing. Therefore, they are as incapable of returning to their skins and their furs as we are. And they find their wants the less tolerable as occasioned by these present arguments with His Majesty's government. You do not care, Mr. Cherokee, who is more successful, our own assemblies or His Majesty's Parliament? No interest whatsoever. Therefore, there is a discourse amongst the many burgesses, the various assemblies throughout our colonies, and most particularly with the assemblies of the Carolinas, to suggest perhaps a removal of these very, very powerful Indian peoples, a resettlement into southern, middle, and northern settlements, reservations, if you will, which will of course be maintained and supported by the several colonies, while at the same time it will lead to a separation of these very powerful Indian peoples. There is no need for fear today. There is only one amongst us, no great threat. I think most evidenced by his attendance here in his underclothes. I am concerned as well, citizens, of our great neglect in trade, that we are thwarted in our efforts to trade freely with any kingdoms of Europe, particularly those north of the Cape of Finisterre in Spain. I make mention of that as well in my summary view. I hope that many of us might be able concurrently to maintain, indeed, a peace with our factors, our agents, to whom we have consumed great quantities of tobacco. I have just recently paid off only a portion of the debt of my father-in-law, Mr. John Wales, £12,000 having been given to the firm of Farrell and Jones in Glasgow. I can assure you that I will continue to pay the debt not only of my father-in-law, but as well my own debt. But I encourage that many a tobacco farmer here not put themselves out any further on tobacco credit. Hold fast to your ready monies, and therefore do not allow, indeed, your creditors, not only in Glasgow, but in Bristol and London, indeed, to be your masters. We must recognize that there well can be a slavery, indeed, of economy amongst merchants as well planters, let alone that we hold in labor. I'm concerned, too, for what appears to be a great neglect amongst us to apprise ourselves of such current events in the newspapers. And that is the opportunity for all of us to pick up a newspaper and to read clearly the differences of opinion that are prevalent not only in Virginia but our colonies. And therefore, if you have heard rumor that Mr. Jefferson does consider that a common curriculum is necessary in Virginia, be apprised, as I admit now, that it is not rumor, that I do desire a system of education to be available in Virginia, to be attended to by the poor as well as the wealthy, the female as well as the male. Already, I think many of you have heard mumblings and grumblings amongst the gentlemen here who do not feel it is necessary. Mr. Henry, in particular, has argued upon this point with me vehemently. He does not believe the education of the female is necessary. For what cause, he is wont to cite. I hope, gentlemen, that you will consider, as I answer Mr. Henry, that nature has sown as much talent and genius in the female as she has in the male. And it will all go to waste unless we seek it out and cultivate it for the benefit of all of us. Let us recognize, citizens, ignorance is not bliss. An educated citizenry is a safe and a well-defended citizenry. Those gentlemen who share, as I do, a great interest and love of ancient history will have already read well that that nation which expects to be ignorant and free expects what never was and surely never will be. And therefore I do desire systems of education, elementary, district school, university, to be appointed and apprised and allowed amongst all of us by those we place in office. And do desire that the ladies, during the young years as well the boys, say between 7 and 10, can attend to an elementary education, and from that, then boys of genius to be selected to go further into the district schools, and from that, boys of genius to be selected to enter a University of Virginia. There is great opposition to my interest upon this subject, I can assure you. particularly in reference that it will need the public support, a tax for the support of education. My answer is plain. The tax you will pay for education will never be more than the 1,000th part of what you will pay to kings, priests, and noblemen who will rise up amongst you if you leave yourselves in ignorance. And then, as promised, before indeed we are to be hit with greater rain upon us, the floor is now yours. Any opinion, I should welcome freely, as well any query to be put forth.
Mr. Jefferson,
Yes, sir.
what specific actions do you suggest that the Congress to be held in Philadelphia to take?
The gentleman, indeed, with the question, what specific action do I believe should be attended by this Congress in Philadelphia this fall? And once again, sir, though I am not delegate, surely am I in attendance to the convention, I do have instructions, and that is that in my summary view I suggest that we put forth all the colonies united, a general representation of what we consider to be our inherent rights, our natural rights, if you will, a declaration of rights, reiteration of that Bill of Rights resulting from our last Civil War, that of '88 and '89, many are to call a glorious revolution. I do not advocate, sir, a revolt or a rebellion, the taking up of arms to establish, secure these rights further. But I do believe, as I have heard by many of my fellow burgesses, and indeed by those who are seated in other assemblies through our colonies, that a revolution has been in the minds of many American-born Englishmen, at least now for a decade, and that it is indeed a reference that we revolve back to the essential elements of our happiness and our freedom. Further queries? Yes.
Since there are no highways, how long will it take the delegate to get from here to Philadelphia, and how will he travel?
The gentleman concerned, since there are no boulevards, highways here throughout the colonies, how long should it take any representative of our colony to venture forth from this vicinage to Philadelphia? Well, sir, the roads are not as well maintained as we would desire betwixt here and Fredericksburg, further to Annapolis, and indeed across the bay from Chester up to Philadelphia. I have never made that route by land. I have ventured by water. Back when I was 23 in '66, I did go up to Philadelphia by boat, reference up through the bay then, and up the Delaware accordingly. But either by boat or indeed by carriage or horseback, it will take a good 9, 10 days, perhaps 12, according to whether indeed the ferrymen are present at all. As I mentioned earlier, sir, the 120 miles I make on roads not maintained practically at all west of Richmond town is a good 5 days in the saddle, and I must cross the waters, rivers about 4 or 5 times. Whenever I arrive, it appears that I must get off my horse, make fire, blow hunting horns so that the ferryman may take sight of my arrival. Of course, it's easier when you venture westward, sir. All the taverns are on the east side of the river. So you know just where to find the ferryman. Yes?
If you believe in freedom, what does the freedom, who does it include? Does it include old men or certain men?
The gentleman with a curious statement, if I believe in freedom, if I believe in a call for our freedom here to govern ourselves as we choose, does that apply to all men? Well, sir, when I speak of freedom, indeed, I speak of it in the universal sense. I speak nothing new in that regard. What I utter has already been said, has already been written. You will discover in the elementary books of public right. The works of Aristotle, the works of Cicero, the works of Algernon Sidney, Mr. John Locke. And therefore it is not new or original, but rather I believe in my own expression, in the expression of any of us here, an example of the American mind in plain and simple terms we would hope to be apprised, to become acquainted with by an innocent world at large. And therefore, sir, I assure you and will continue to reiterate that we speak not for ourselves alone, but for the whole human race. This gentleman here. So the young man, curious, he said, tell us about my family. Well, if you will, sir, I am one of 10 children. Indeed, my mother gave birth to 6 girls and 4 boys. And I was the eldest son. I had 2 sisters older than me, Mary and Jenny. I'm happy to say that my sisters have married, except 2, who I'm afraid died when they were young. I had 2 brothers who died in infancy. My youngest brother, Randolph, who is a twin to my youngest sister, Anna Scott, has just taken up property along the James River. Now, I have recently married, January 1st, 1772, about 2.5 years ago, a widow, one former widow Skelton, the wife of Mr. Bathurst Skelton. They were only married 2 years before he died. And we've been married now for the 2.5 years and have 2 daughters. Our eldest daughter, Patsy, who is about, let me see now, she's about 1.5 years, and our second eldest child, a daughter named Jane, after my mother. And we live out west on the top of a mountain, where I am now building a house. It's called Monticello. Do you know what Monticello means? I would reckon you do and may not even realize it. Mont means what? What do you think? A mont would mean a mountain. That's right. Now, a cello, I have ever favored the Italian language. I find it most melodious, indeed in an expression. And so, as we know, a cello is a beautiful musical instrument, but a cello compares how so to a bass in size. A cello is smaller. So there you are. Monticello is my small mountain. It is not the largest of all the mountains there in the southwest chain. And that is where Mrs. Jefferson, my 2 daughters, and I reside. And you're more than welcome to come visit me whenever you so choose with your family. Where do you live? At where? Hershey. Hershey. Well, where is that? It's in Pennsylvania. Well, you have traveled very, very far, I dare say. Have you tasted any of the fine confectionery of some of our bakers here in town? There is a lady just down the street who makes a very, very delicious chocolate. And I am sure if you taste this, you will have never tasted a chocolate any better. And if you carry it back to your settlement of Hershey, who knows what you could start. Yes, sir. Do I believe that our colonies are in need of a monarch? Indeed, sir, we want to attend upon a very thin line here of comment relative indeed to treason, if I bespeak my own personal opinion. I would say that I would be very much in favor, as Dr. Franklin has accounted might be necessary, an American Parliament to be established here that might be elected directly of our freeholders and might indeed be open to presiding a chief magistrate appointed by the king, a viceroy, if you will. Or, even better, perhaps the election of a chief magistrate by that parliament. I think that is all we need here in the colonies, rather than a greater forbearance put unto us by His Majesty 3,000 miles away. Indeed, that's Mr. Henry, the lady making statement that yesterday She was here in the company of Mr. Henry, and he made it known publicly that I very much dislike him. Madam, that is a mistruth. May I say it, I do not dislike Mr. Henry, and certainly not very much by any account. I consider myself a friend of Mr. Henry. We do agree on most points. There are points of disagreement, surely. Yet I'm happy to say, as American-born Englishmen, Mr. Henry and I recognize first and foremost our right to disagree, that we agree to disagree. We have known each other for many, many years. He is a man of great reputation, great conviction. And I shall never forget, madam, back in May of '65, when I heard Mr. Henry stand and orate, speak out against the Stamp Act. And I believe it was an occasion which many of us now want to be apprised of almost as if it were legend. Indeed, that Mr. Henry stood to speak for quite some time and finally made statement that as we are lovers of history and know that history must stand to be recognized as evidence of what can happen not only at present but in the future, that we should not forget that Julius Caesar had his Brutus, and that King Charles had his Cromwell, and that His Majesty, and it was at that point that cries of treason erupted amongst the burgesses. And Mr. Speaker Robinson, the Speaker of the House at the time, brought his staff down with a clamor requesting silence amongst the burgesses and Mr. Henry to apologize, not only to his fellow burgesses, but as well to His Majesty. Directly, Mr. Henry did apologize, but as he was seating himself, and there are various comments as to exactly what he said, but I heard Mr. Henry comment that His Majesty should profit from that history. If this be treason, then let us make the most of it. Now, madam, I think at that moment I recognized he speaks just as Homer wrote, and he did surely set an impetus to a great ball of revolution that continues to roll not only throughout Virginia, but our colonies. But I think also many of us recognized in that instance that Mr. Henry will always have the last word. So I should not comment further upon our friend. Madam, how soon do I think we can abolish slavery? Madam, I would question whether indeed we can recognize an abolishment entirely during my lifetime, and as well perhaps even to abolish it entirely during our children's lifetime. It will require as many generations attending to such an abolition as have already been attendant to such servitude and slavery. Within 150 years, madam, there have been perhaps 5 or 6 generations, both slave as well as master, that have become accustomed to it. And we hold now a wolf by the ear that we cannot let go, let alone hold on. In our one hand is our own self-preservation, slave as well as master. In the other, there is justice. And therefore, I believe it must be attended to by degrees in its abolition. We must attend to changing the law. Anything less will incur an insurrection, a riot, and great bloodshed. And I value much, not so that the master will be the victim, as indeed his slaves will be the ones to fall prey to tarring, feathering, maiming, and killing, and therefore more an act of inhumanity than it should be an act of freedom. So I hope we may attend to it gradually, by degrees, and attend to changing the law. Otherwise, madam, if we still want to witness this in the year of our children's children, I doubt it will be compromised by anything short than a war of economy. Yes?
Do you have any further political aspirations?
Any further political aspirations? Sir, I can assure you that I have already served my duty now more than 5 years. I think that as any gentleman would want to attend to his duty, he realizes the more he is away from his family and his farms, the more they are neglected. So I do desire to return to my family and my farm shortly, take up my residence under my own fig and vine, and hope that new blood might be secured in my office that I have already served. So, no, sir, I hope that our difficulties with Great Britain will be amended in the next year or so, and that I might retire. This lady here, yes, ma'am. The lady having made mention that, as I've already expressed my opinion, upon ladies attending to an education? What then is my opinion upon ladies attending to the franchise, to be able to place a vote? Well, madam, it would be a direct neglect and in opposition to our habit and our custom these many, many generations and many, many centuries. Based upon the element of property that is franchise vested in land, the ownership and protection, defense thereof, that whenever two people are want to be co-joined in marriage as one flesh, so does their property come together to be represented as one unit by one vote. It is not to neglect, of course, the many ladies who are femme sole in their ownership of property and conduct business to a great profit, as Mrs. Ryan is example, or indeed Mrs. Campbell is example. But I doubt that you would see the franchise in reference to the protection appointed to in our militia, defense of our property, ownership of our property, to be in the hands of the ladies entirely to take effect at any short time, by any means. It would take many, many years, well beyond my lifetime, and I guess I can answer safely that I'm only happy I will not live to see it.
I like rap a little bit. I'm not really sure. But rap that I do like is a lot faster. Most of the fast stuff I can't even listen to because, or I don't even listen to because, you know, they're all cussing like every 2 seconds and stuff. I don't like it. But listen to some rappers that were really slow. Left guy is just going to walk around the wall, and the one on the right hand side is for the guy. Yeah, I like pretty sonic and stuff. I like a lot of heavy music, but I'll listen to anything with country.
Not much country Christian music out there.
Yeah.
I was born in Mississippi too, but I was kind of raised in that atmosphere.
I can listen to anything from like the Cathedrals to Project 86.
I'm such a young nation. Take from other cultures.
Oh, the X-ray in that, you might as well take it off.
Hey, this X-ray doesn't mess with your camera, so your film doesn't. But,
No, it doesn't bother the videotape.
What about this time here?
Didn't bother that either.
What about the film?
No.
This seems so close to guy that I can really talk to himself and share it. But it seems like I just like the local dance better. I go to the concerts and stuff. It's only like $3 to get, $5 to get into the concerts real cheap. I just go and there's one band called Dead Poetic. I don't know why they named themselves that. They used to be called Mindset, but they said there was too many bands called Mindset.
back.
Okay, good.
Look up.
Step inside the rooftop area.
Getting all this, Daniel? Should we take pictures of all this?
From north to south, football field wide, from east to west. This is the home of the legislative branch of the United States government. The branch consists of the United States Congress, made up of two bodies, the House and the Senate. The House meets down that way, and the Senate is all the way here. As far as I know, both are still in session at this time. The President of the United States, the chief executive, or the executive branch is not working here. The executive branch is down in the White House, around the corner down Pennsylvania Avenue. Where you're standing here, up to the top of the dome, is about 180 feet, or the equivalent of an 18-story building. The pole went in through the door and set it up on its end. While you're looking up there, you're looking at 9 million pounds of cast iron. That's what the dome is made of. It's made on the outside to match as close as possible the marble that's on the outside of most of the building. Not the first dome on the Capitol. The first dome, put up about 1824, made out of wood. Much different than what you see up here because it was round and solid, covered on the outside with copper. It had a hole in the center to let in light. As an unintended consequence, it also let in moisture. In 1851, the Library of Congress, which was meeting roughly through this doorway over here and a little bit to the left, caught fire. The flames got a little bit too close to comfort to that wooden dome. That wooden dome, which is only half the height of this one, was replaced as a result of those various factors. Taken down in the early 1850s, construction started on the magnificent structure that you see here today. And that took about 10 years to complete. At the top of the dome, if you look up, it looks like you're viewing a heavenly scene. It looks like a heavenly scene. Yes, okay, right. The author, I should say the author, what am I trying to say? Artist. A man by the name of Constantino Brumidi entitled that whole thing up there, The Apotheosis of George Washington, raising up to the level of a god. Everybody see George Washington up there. Anybody tell me what he's wearing? Did I hear dress? Okay, yeah. A lot of the young kids, they look like he's wearing a purple dress. We call it a blanket or a lap robe. George Washington is up there also. He's wearing his blue military uniform. On either side of him, we have a couple female figures. This side representing liberty and the other side victory. And then completing kind of a circle around them, kind of a rough circle, almost a T, are 13 smaller female figures. 13, an unlucky number, right? No, why not? States, right, the original 13 colonies. Around them we have a host of other figures, and what they basically serve to do is unite a new young nation that is portrayed up there with the ancient knowledge of the older civilization. We'll come down a little bit further here to this brown and white band here. We're going to go through 411 years of American history. We're going to do it, however, fairly rapidly, so we're not here all day or all year. Start by looking at the doorway over here. Go up a little bit to the right. You see a man coming down here. And who was that by? Right, Christopher Columbus. Now, when did he make his voyage?
1492.
Right. 1492. Seeing the ocean blue. Okay, that's the start of our journey, 1492. Now, we're going to go through almost 300 years because we can't see 300 years. We're going to go almost 300 years. When it started, of course, with this sword. What soul does this represent? There's no particular man that I'm aware of that portrays, but it does portray a significant event in American history. Right? That's right, the Revolutionary War, specifically 1775, the Battle of Lexington, shot around the world. And just next to it, we're going to go just 1 year, 1776. See the men standing on that pedestal. The signers, some of the signers of the Constitution, reading the Constitution Declaration, reading the Declaration of Independence in 1776. Okay, now let's go up about another 75 years. California. Over here from California. Some of you maybe can recognize it anyway. You see over here the man with the pickaxe. That's right, California Gold Rush, 1850, 1849, 1850. And then we're going to go up another, let's see, 50, let's say another 53 years. Complete our journey. What? That's right, the Wright brothers. Again, up from the door, this time a little bit to the left. See the Wright brothers. One's flying, the other is running. Where did this take place? Very good. What state? North Carolina. What year? Gave you a clue. I said from 1850, we're going to go up 53 years. Very good. Okay. American history, 411 years of American history is almost 3 sections or whatever. Okay. Come down a little bit further. Let's talk about the huge paintings you see around here. The paintings on this side of the room are scenes of pre-independence, basically. Settlement, colonization of America, if you will. For instance, right here. This is to what one man, one artist, thought may have been the scene when De Soto discovered the Mississippi River. The man who painted this is a man by the name of William Powell, and he painted it in 1853. You know that. You look at the lower right-hand corner, you see where he signed his name, and he dated it. Now, if I can direct your attention, please, to the other side of it. We have 4 paintings there. Revolutionary and post-revolutionary America. Again, the signing of the Declaration of Independence over the far wall. We've got Thomas Jefferson standing there in the red vest. Yeah.
Hey, Snow, one of the guys spotted Stuart in the park. Smokey sent me to get you.
Gee, Monty, I'm in for the night. It's late. Besides, Stuart is gone. Can't we just give the kid a break?
Of course we could give him a break. First we'll break his little arms, then we'll break his little legs, and then we'll take a break. But first we gotta find him.
Happy family? Oh. You don't have to look alike. You don't even have to like each other. Look at Snowbell. And still, he's trying to save me. Sure, you'll probably scratch him up pretty bad. You'll tear him to shreds. You may even kill him. But Snowbound will not run away. And that is what family is all about. Right? No? Maybe family's too strong a word. Scratch them both. Both? Hey, it's me, you guys. Come get me. Here we go.
To the efforts of historians, that Martha Washington on December 23rd, 1783, when this scene took place, Martha Washington was back in alternative to this Christmas. She claims as being a painter, so photographer. Kind of do things the way you want them to come out. And he thought she should be in the ring. Okay. By the way, all these are originals, and they date as far back as 1819, as in the case of the Declaration of Independence picture over there. We've got some statues in here. Some are given by the states, some are or other sources as gifts. For instance, over here, you see that statue of 3 women on it. This was given to the U.S. by the National Women's Party in 1920 to commemorate the signing of ratification in 1990. Well, pretty leading suffragettes, including Suzanne and Swan. And Susan B. Anthony. On the other side, Congress bust of Dr. Martin Luther King. That commemorates the designation of Dr. King's birthday as a national holiday. The room we're in right now, called the Rotunda, a big round room with a dome on top of it. One of its most famous uses is that of a place where a ceremony, a solemn ceremony, known as lying in state takes place. 52 persons have been so honored, lying in state with the body in the casket, the body in the center of the room. We may come in and pay our last respects. Gentleman from Kentucky. That's right. 52. First person to lie in state. 2 most recent persons to lie in state, 2 Capitol Police officers. Shot and killed 3 years ago today. Downstairs on duty. Now I'm going to go across the Rotunda and through the doorway over there to the next stop on our tour. Please follow me.
Okay, now let's talk about what you'll see here in the rotunda. Up in the eye of the dome, that painting up there. Okay, folks, gather around here. I want to gather up, come up just a little bit closer. Feel free to do so. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is the hall of the house.
So that's the name of this chamber, 1807 to 1857. This is where the House of Representatives met. If you wanted to be president, this is, at least back then, this is the place to be, because 8 persons who served in this chamber also from time to time served the country as president of the United States, including the person whose desk site we're gathered around right now. There's a little brass plaque on the floor, and it says John Quincy Adams on it. John Quincy Adams, 6th President of the United States from 1825 to 1829. He left then, and in 1831, he came back here as an elected representative from the state of Massachusetts. Interestingly enough, he's the only person to kind of, if you will, do it in reverse. 7 of the 8 were representatives first, and then went on to become president. John Quincy was president first. Came back here, he says some of the most happiest years of his life. Now, it said that John Quincy Adams, this may be more legend than fact, but we'll tell the story anyway. It said that he could hear what was going on in this chamber, even if it was spoken by somebody across the room with their back towards him, and even supposedly if John Quincy Adams had his head down his desk taking a nap. Well, there's a little magic in this chamber, aided and abetted by the ceiling, this nice circular ceiling. I'll talk more about that a little bit later. What I want to do now is demonstrate what we think may have happened. So I'm going to go across the room and I am going to talk to you. I will turn my back to you briefly, pardon me. And I'm going to say hello, Illinois, and you from Florida? Hello, Florida, and hello, Minnesota, and if I can think of some other states, I'll say those also. Now, I'll repeat myself because those in the back may not be able to hear. It's a very localized phenomenon. So if you lose in front of these chambers, go in the back. But at any rate, I need all of you to gather up your little as possible. This is not the time to worry about the fact that you got to put on you won't see most of the people here anyway. So, gather on in. If you can all, again, can you pull up a little bit here so we can keep it clear for other people to have a little fun over there. Okay. Did it sound like my voice is coming in right over your heads? Well, as I said, the culprit is this beautiful ceiling. They wanted a nice open airy room, and the architect looked towards, Greece and Rome for inspiration, the Pantheon, etc. And so they put in this nice semicircular ceiling. It wasn't until Congress moved in here that they discovered that the problem was a beautiful semicircular, or circular ceiling for that matter, has a tendency to take sound waves that are bounced off the floor, sent up to the ceiling, and rather than acting as a diffuser, it acts as a concentrator and sends the sound waves down to a specific point across the room. And by the way, it's reciprocal. You could hear me, I could hear you. And that is the only 2 points in the room where this works now. However, back then, before there was subsequent remodeling, etc., there were points like that all over the room here. It drove the house nuts. If you wanted to hear the speaker was up in the front of the room, you probably couldn't. On the other hand, if you and I are trying to hold a conversation here about the jerk across the room, guess what? The jerk heard it, yeah. Lots of red faces in here. That's one of the reasons why the house was happy to move out of here in 1857. Moved down the hall to much larger quarters. And then this became known as National Statuary Hall by declaration of Congress. And And each state was invited to send or contribute up to 2 statues per state of persons who they thought were deserving of recognition. And to date, we have 97 statues contributed by the states. 38 of those 97s are actually in Statuary Hall. The rest, for weight reasons, are distributed elsewhere throughout the capital. And some of the states represented in here do have at least one of their statues in Statuary Hall. For instance, Florida. The man right here, Dr. John Gorey. He's one of the first persons to, in fact, I guess he had the first patent on mechanical refrigeration. Do we have you? I can't remember. Anybody from Illinois? Okay, that's right. And here's Illinois' contribution, Francis Willard, former dean at Northwestern University and founder of the Women's Christian Temperance Union. And also the first statue of a woman to be placed in the collection. Minnesota. Where's Minnesota? There we are. Minnesota. Henry Maurer Rice is the 3rd statue from the left over there. Of those standing, I should say, he's in white marble. A man so important, I named 2 counties after him. More, at least possible. Minnesota's first senator, at any rate. And let's see, maybe for one other statue. What other state is here? Pardon? Kentucky. Yeah, Kentucky. You've seen Henry Clay, of course, right there. Second, he's got his hat in his hand and his walking stick in his left hand. That's Kentucky's contribution to the Statuary Hall collection. A couple of other things while we're in here. Look up behind you, please. There's the Statue of Liberty. In case you're confused, no, this is not the Statue of Liberty. At least not the one you're probably thinking of in New York Harbor. But it's, the artist called it Statue of Liberty. On this side we have an eagle. It represents strength. On the other side, what do we have?
Serpent.
Snake, yeah, serpent. Now, what do you suppose that represents? And by the way, Mr. Kosicki, the sculptor, said that in ancient times a snake represented something positive.
Justice.
Pardon?
Justice.
Justice? Swift. Well, that's a good one. It's not what Mr. Kosicki had in mind. Shrewdness.
Health.
Balance. Health. Health is a common guess because of the doctor's, what do we call it? Shield or whatever with an inclining serpent. Pardon? Very good. Wisdom. Apparently in the ancient times, that's what a serpent stood for, is wisdom.
Like I said earlier,
Ah, okay, yeah. Credit Discovery Channel, thank you. That's been here since 1819. Also dating to that time and close to it, right back here. Now what does that look like? Well, a chariot, that's right. Now Mr. Franzoni called that a car. He says that's Cleo in the car of history. Cleo is the muse of history, and you see she's standing up, she's writing down what's happening as history is going by here. And of course the House of Representatives were convinced they're the ones who were making history. And arguably they were. That also dates again to 1819, 1820. Okay, what we're going to do now is go through the doorway here and go down the steps. Would you please follow me? When you do, watch it, there's a step down, and then before we get on the stairway itself. Once we're on the stairway, We started upstairs, the second floor in the rotunda. We're now on the first floor, directly underneath the rotunda. You see 40 Virginia sandstone columns here, very important to us because they're holding up where we used to be. And holding up that 9 million pounds of cast iron, etc. And we call this area the crypt. And when I say crypt, what does that remind somebody of? Grave. Underneath the floor here, we have a tomb. George Washington's tomb. How many have been out to Mount Vernon? How many people have been out to Mount Vernon? Not to embarrass people. Okay, we have 1 or 2. Now, when you're out there, did you see a tomb? 2 of them. 2 of them. That's very good. Not that many people say, I actually saw 2 tombs out there. And they purported to say that George Washington's body is in one of them, right? Correct. Okay. Well, let me tell you. Let's work this through here. We have George Washington's tomb here. Supposing that George Washington's out of Mount Vernon, what gives, right? Let's go back to 1799, which is when George Washington died. The country was grief-stricken. The father of the country is dead. We must preserve his memory forever. Decided the best way to do that was to bury him in the Capitol. And then there would be a statue directly above his tomb. The statue would have been right in here, the hole in the ceiling up there for people to look down at the statue and remember him. 1799, we had a minor problem. We didn't have Capitol. First part of the Capitol wasn't ready until November of 1800, and that was the little part kind of over through that door. The whole Capitol was built in stages. Now in 1799, I said no problem because we expect the Capitol to be completed very shortly. After all, we are starting the foundation, etc., etc., etc. Well, age-old problem, over budget and off schedule. It took more than just a couple of years to complete the Capitol. As a matter of fact, it took 25 years before this part of the Capitol containing the tomb was completed. Even then, sometimes things around here don't always go according to schedule. Even then, it wasn't until 1832, the centennial of Washington's birth, that somebody finally said, we've got to follow through on this. We've got to bring George back to his final resting place. Well, by then, Virginia, the state, said, no, I'll leave him there. And so did some of Washington's own relatives. Congress thought that over for a while. I'm not sure how much longer, but they had them on a while. Okay. So, yes. You are right. One of the tombs in Mount Vernon, the big one, it does contain the body of George Washington and that of his wife Martha. But he is probably the only man in America to have 3 tombs for his use. He gets started with one or the other out of Mount Vernon, he always come back here. He'll be welcome. There's no other body down there, so those of you concerned about that, don't worry about that either. But it is now the resting place for the platform, known as the catafalque, that's used when there's a lying estate upstairs. That's its hallowed resting place until it's needed. Otherwise, the crypt, which is used to describe a lower level room, tells you the story of the development of the Capitol. And it's told in displays on the wall and in the display cases behind me and around the room. Feel free to take a look at those when you are at your own leisure. Let me tell you about some of the other things you can see while you're still here in the U.S. Capitol. Through the doorway over there and to your right is the first home in Washington of the U.S. Supreme Court. They met there for 50 years. The room has been restored to the way it looked in 1860. And directly above it, back up on the second floor, is the old Senate chamber. Again, restored to the way it looked when the Senate met there from 1810 to 1859. Feel free to go to either one of those places as you wish. Those of you who wish to view the House and the Senate, they are in session. As far as I know, both houses are in session. You will need gallery passes to get into the galleries. Those of you who do not have gallery passes and want to visit the House and the Senate, hang on afterwards and I'll tell you the procedure. It's about a 20-minute or a half-hour procedure to go over and get them. Otherwise, if you want to leave here, you want to go to the Smithsonian or whatever, you can just head out these steps right here. Or you want to go in the same way, go out the same way you came in, go through the doorway over here. Just go around the gift shop, stop there if you wish, or otherwise just go on. Also through that door are two very important rooms. To the left of the gift shop is one marked men. To the right of the gift shop is one marked women. I know whenever I start talking about those rooms, it's time for me to stop. So this ends your guided tour of the U.S. Capitol. Again, you're welcome to stay here as long as you wish until 6 o'clock, whichever is later. Thank you for being with me today. If you need more information, I'll hang around for a few minutes afterwards. Otherwise, thank you for being with me. Enjoy the rest of your time here in the U.S. Capitol. Martin?
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? I am Staff Sergeant Kelly of the 3rd Infantry Regiment, United States Army, Commander of the Relief, Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. The ceremony that you are about to witness is the changing of the guard. In keeping with the dignity of this ceremony, it is requested that everyone remain silent and standing. Thank you.
Forward, hard.
Guards, vote. Forward, march. Guards, vote. Port, arms. Ready, haste. Present, arms. Port, arms. Ready, haste. Pass. On your orders.
Post and orders remain as directed.
Orders acknowledged.
Ready, haste. Present, arms. Right shoulder, arms. Right, face. Right, face. Forward, march. Time, move. Follow.
That's part of the honor guard. It's in the tan and black.